You're seriously not ordering anything again? I felt my cheeks flush as the words left Jessica's mouth, half laughing, half teasing. My name is Emily, I'm 25, and I work as a project coordinator at a small marketing firm in San Francisco. I live alone in a modest apartment in the Mission District, and between rent, utilities, and groceries, there's rarely money left over for indulgences. But despite the tight budget, I've always valued my friendship with Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda, my co-workers who somehow always seemed to orbit each other, glowing with effortless charm and confidence. Tonight, we were at the Velvet Fox, a trendy bar downtown known for its extravagant cocktails and pricey small plates. As soon as we settled into the booth, the three of them dove into the menu with that familiar air of entitlement I had learned to anticipate. The truffle mac and cheese here is divine, Amanda murmured, tracing her finger over the description. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. And the Midnight in Paris cocktail. Totally unique experience. You have to try it. Jessica leaned back in her seat, smirking, clearly amused that I was scrutinizing the menu like a reluctant guest at someone else's party. I opened my own menu, my stomach tightening at the sight of prices that made me wince. The main dishes were between $40 and $60, cocktails $15 to $25, and specialty desserts ran even higher. I could easily spend $80 or more for a full meal, far beyond what I felt comfortable paying on a Friday evening. I lifted my eyes to their expectant faces and tried to sound casual, though my voice trembled slightly. I think I'll just have some sparkling water tonight, I said, closing the menu. The laughter came instantly. Wow, Emily, still doing this, huh? Jessica giggled, nudging Sarah. When was the last time you actually ordered food with us? Sarah joined in, her tone light but carrying that subtle edge that stung. You're the most disciplined person I know. I mean, look at you, Amanda added, smiling, but I could feel the undercurrent of mockery. Their words weren't compliments, they were reminders of my financial reality, twisted into entertainment for their amusement. The waiter approached, and I watched silently as Sarah ordered first, sea bass with wasabi puree and a Sunset Boulevard cocktail, $1.52 just for her. Jessica followed with lamb, herb crust, and imported wine, $1.48. Amanda's choice, lobster with champagne sauce and a Negroni, $1.55. When it was my turn, their expectant eyes bore into me. Just sparkling water, I said quietly. The silence that followed was almost comical if it weren't so tense. Are you sure? The waiter asked. Not even an appetizer. I'm sure, I replied, forcing a smile. And that's when the teasing escalated. She's really committed to this diet, Sarah said, mock concern dripping from her voice. Are you overdoing it? Jessica chimed in, her tone sweet but sharp. Or is it money? Amanda asked more directly, raising an eyebrow. I cut them off quickly, cheeks burning. It's not that. I'm just not hungry. But as the night unfolded, I realized it wasn't just about food or diet. It was about power, control, and amusement at my expense. Each comment about the food's excellence, each sly nudge or glance, was a reminder of my place in their world. While they indulged, I silently calculated, again and again, how much I had spent over the months covering for them $15 martinis, $18 appetizers, $1.45 on trays while I nursed sparkling water or peanuts from the bar. They knew my financial situation. They knew I lived alone. Yet every Friday I had quietly paid, swallowing hard so that the group harmony remained intact. Tonight, however, something inside me was shifting. By the time dessert arrived, the mental arithmetic in my head was suffocating. Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda had each spent over $70, while my contribution was a meager $3 for sparkling water. When the bill landed on our table, Sarah casually announced, $218, shall we split it 4 ways? $54.50 each. My heart stopped. $54.50 for my water. I whispered, shock and disbelief tightening my chest. Their laughter had vanished. The smiles disappeared. Jessica was the first to speak. Emily, we always split it equally. It's easier that way. But I didn't eat anything. I protested. You knew I was only drinking water. Sarah sighed, irritation barely masked as patience. It's practical. You were here with us. Enjoyed the atmosphere, the company. Enjoyed the atmosphere? I echoed incredulously. You want me to pay $54.50 to breathe the same air as you? Amanda leaned forward, diplomatic. We understand your situation, but in a group, it's normal to split costs. Social etiquette. Social etiquette. As if I were being rude for refusing to finance their indulgences. That's when I felt a courage I hadn't known I possessed. No, I will pay my fair share, the $3 for water, plus a tip. That's $4. Nothing more. The tension that followed was almost theatrical. Heads turned from nearby tables. Whispers filled the air. Sarah, irritated. Jessica, frowning. Amanda, silent. I stood up, calm but resolute. I'm not paying for your food. Never again. I left $4 on the table and walked out, legs trembling but head held high. For months, I had been complicit. Tonight, I finally established a boundary. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Respecting myself could hurt, but it was necessary. Little did I know, this night would mark the beginning of a transformation that would change everything about my friendships, my confidence, and my life in ways I could never have predicted. By the time the check arrived, the tension at the table had thickened like the fog rolling over the San Francisco Bay outside the restaurant window. Madison, Lily, and Claire, my co-workers, and, until recently, my so-called friends had already finished their meals, savoring every bite as though they were in a food magazine spread. I, on the other hand, had sipped my sparkling water quietly, smiling politely, hiding the gnawing frustration building inside me. When Madison picked up the check and announced, "All right, everyone, let's split it 4 ways," I froze. My $4 water, my modest contribution, suddenly seemed to have multiplied into a $54.50 obligation. I opened my mouth, but the words came out louder than I expected. I only had water, I said, my voice wavering between incredulity and embarrassment. Madison blinked, then laughed lightly. "Emma, we always split the bill equally, it's easier that way." Lily chimed in, her tone soft but firm. "It doesn't matter what you ordered. You're part of the group. You enjoy the atmosphere, right?" Claire nodded in agreement, her smile tight. Enjoy the atmosphere. My eyebrows lifted involuntarily. That was the closest thing to an insult I had ever heard masked as friendliness. I wanted to tell them that no, enjoying their lavish meals while paying for them wasn't part of my weekend fun. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I can pay my fair share, $4 for my water plus a tip. That's it. Silence fell across the table. The waiter, holding a pen and notepad, looked uncertain, caught in the awkward standoff. Madison huffed, clearly irritated. "Emma, you're making this really uncomfortable. We've always split everything, and it's never been a problem before." "It was never a problem because I always paid quietly," I said, feeling a surge of courage I hadn't known I possessed. "Not this time. I'm not paying for your meals. Not anymore." The tension in the air was palpable. Heads turned at nearby tables, people murmuring quietly. Lily leaned forward, lowering her voice as if to reason with me. "Emma, you know we didn't mean anything by it. It's just how we do things. You're overreacting." Overreacting. The word hit me like a punch. For months, I had swallowed the embarrassment, covering for their extravagance, silently contributing to their comfort while I barely kept my own finances afloat. This time, I wasn't swallowing anything. I stood up, my legs slightly trembling, my head held high. "I've paid my part. That's it. Never again will I let this happen. Never again will I be treated like this just because of money. You can enjoy your meals, but I'm done being exploited." I left $4 on the table, a tip included, and walked toward the door. The weight of months of suppressed frustration lifting with each step. Madison called after me, her tone shifting from surprise to anger. "Emma, wait." I didn't stop. I knew the confrontation had changed something about me, about them, about the way this dynamic could continue. By the time I reached my apartment, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving me exhausted but strangely liberated. I sank onto the couch, running my hands over my face. For months, I had felt trapped, balancing on a tightrope of social expectation and financial reality. But tonight, I had drawn a line. Tonight, I had chosen myself, and as I stared out the window at the city lights flickering in the distance, I realized that the storm of tension at the restaurant was only the beginning. The real test would come at work on Monday, when I would have to face Madison, Lily, and Claire again, knowing that the narrative they would spin in my absence could very well paint me as the villain. And so, with a mixture of apprehension and quiet determination, I prepared myself for what I knew was inevitable: the fallout of finally standing up, the reckoning of finally saying no, and the courage to reclaim control over my life and my boundaries. For the first time in a long while, I felt the raw, thrilling power of self-respect, and I knew I wouldn't be stepping back into that trap knot for anyone. Monday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive humidity that made the office feel smaller than usual. I walked in, my heels clicking against the tile floor, feeling eyes on me before I even reached my desk. Madison, Lily, and Claire were clustered together near the coffee machine, whispering, glancing over their shoulders as if plotting something. The moment I appeared, their voices quieted, replaced by forced smiles. "Morning, Emma," Madison said, her tone saccharine but with a sharp edge beneath it. Lily and Claire echoed her greeting, but it lacked sincerity. I nodded politely, ignoring the tremor of tension crawling up my spine. As I settled into my chair, I overheard snippets of their conversation. "She thinks she can just walk out. We can't let this set a precedent. Makes everyone else uncomfortable." I took a deep breath, reminding myself why I had drawn the line at the restaurant. Yes, the office was a battlefield, and yes, Madison and her friends thrived on social dominance. But I had gained something stronger than fear. Clarity. By mid-morning, the first confrontation arrived. Madison approached my desk, hands on her hips, her carefully polished smile failing to mask irritation. "Emma, can we talk?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. I gestured toward the empty chair across from me. "About what?" I asked evenly, resisting the urge to fold under her gaze. "About last Friday," she began, eyes narrowing slightly. "Walking out like that? It embarrassed us in front of everyone. It was unprofessional." Her words were measured, but I could detect the venom beneath. I let silence linger, forcing her to fill the gap. "I just couldn't pay for all of your meals," I said finally, voice steady. "I wasn't embarrassed. I just won't let this happen again." "That's not unprofessional, it's setting a boundary." She frowned, as if the concept of boundaries were foreign. "Emma, it's about team harmony." "You can't just know," I interrupted, my own voice firmer than I expected. "Team harmony doesn't mean one person bears all the cost while everyone else benefits. If this is about harmony, then it has to be fair. I've paid my part. That's it. If you want harmony, respect boundaries. Otherwise, I'm not participating in the dynamic anymore." Madison's jaw tightened, and she stormed back toward her group. I could hear Lily muttering, "She's making a scene." Claire gave me a look that was equal parts disbelief and annoyance. But I didn't flinch. Something had shifted inside. Me, this was no longer about meals, or money, or embarrassment. This was about respect, about reclaiming my voice in a space where it had been quietly ignored for far too long. By lunchtime, the whispers around me were unmistakable. Some colleagues gave sympathetic nods, others avoided eye contact, and a few dared to smirk. It was clear that my actions had created ripples throughout the office. But for the first time, I didn't care. I focused on my work, my integrity, and the knowledge that I had stood up for myself. And then the unexpected happened. My manager, Mr. Patel, called me into his office. Heart racing, I stepped inside, bracing for reprimand. But instead, he smiled warmly, genuinely. "Emma, I heard about the situation with your team last Friday," he said. "I want you to know, I support you. Setting boundaries is important, and it shows strength, not weakness. You handled it the right way." Relief and pride washed over me. The office had changed in a matter of hours. The dynamic that once seemed untouchable, the clique that thrived on social leverage, was shaken. And I realized something crucial. Standing up for yourself doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see yourself. By the time I left the office that evening, I walked with a lighter step. The battle wasn't over. Madison, Lily, and Claire would continue to test limits, to push back, but I now understood the most important truth. No one could take my self-respect from me. And sometimes, saying no is the bravest, most liberating thing you can do. The following week felt like walking through a minefield. Madison and her clique didn't confront me directly, but their subtle maneuvers made every interaction tense. Emails went unanswered, invitations to after-work events were mysteriously forgotten, and whispered comments followed me down hallways. It was obvious. They were testing me, seeing if I would crack under pressure. By Wednesday, it escalated. During a team meeting, Madison presented a project idea, something I had originally suggested weeks ago, but framed it as her own. When I raised a point for clarification, she interrupted sharply, "Emma, maybe you missed the memo." A few colleagues chuckled awkwardly. My stomach clenched, but I held my ground, calmly stating my input and backing it with facts. Lily leaned over at one point, whispering, You should just let it go. Don't start drama. I didn't respond. Letting it go was easy. Compromising my integrity wasn't. By Friday, the tension reached a boiling point. Madison had orchestrated a small gathering in the break room, calling it a team bonding exercise. Everyone was there except me. She assumed I wouldn't show. But I did. I walked in confidently, holding my coffee like armor. Eyes turned. Murmurs filled the room. "Emma," Madison said, forced cheerfulness in her voice. "Glad you could join us." I smiled lightly, unshaken. Wouldn't miss it. The gathering was awkward, punctuated by subtle jabs and passive-aggressive jokes aimed at me. But I noticed something remarkable. A few colleagues, people who had always been quiet or distant, started quietly supporting me. Smiles, small nods, even joining in on my side of conversations. Slowly, the power Madison thought she held began to erode. By the end of the hour, I realized the office had shifted. The clique's influence wasn't gone, but it was weakened. Their dominance depended on fear and submission, and I refused to play that game. By standing up for myself, I had not only reclaimed my dignity, but I had inspired others to do the same in small ways. Later that day, Mr. Patel called me into his office again. "Emma," he said, smiling, "I've noticed how you handled yourself this week. It's not easy standing up in the face of subtle hostility, but you've done it with grace and professionalism. Keep it up." Relief mixed with pride. I realized that real strength isn't about winning every battle, it's about refusing to let others define your limits. Madison and her clique would continue to push, but they had underestimated the quiet power of someone who refuses to be intimidated. As I left the office that evening, the sunset reflecting off the windows, I felt a newfound clarity. The battle for respect wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. And that, I realized, was the true victory. Monday morning arrived with a tension that was almost tangible. I walked into the office, aware that Madison, Chloe, and Vanessa were already gathered near the break room. Their eyes flicked toward me, sharp with calculation, as if plotting the day's next move. But I walked with calm confidence, carrying my laptop and a folder of notes. I wouldn't be caught off guard again. By mid-morning, the inevitable confrontation came. Madison approached me near the printer, her usual feigned cheerfulness replaced by thinly veiled frustration. "Emma, can we talk?" she asked. Her voice carried the implication that I owed her compliance, that I had caused chaos with my refusal to pay or participate in their manipulative games. I nodded, gesturing to the quiet hallway. "Sure, let's talk." She tried to start with soft words, attempting to frame herself as "I think we might have misunderstood each other last week at Azure. Maybe things got out of hand." "And Madison," I interrupted gently but firmly, "let's be clear. I never refused to contribute unfairly. I contributed exactly what was agreed upon, and more, organizing and paying for the decorations and cake. I will not accept being portrayed as the problem when I've already gone above and beyond." Her expression faltered. The calculated mask of superiority cracked for a fraction of a second. "But you left before the dinner ended." "That was embarrassing," she said, trying to regain control. I let out a small, steady laugh. "Embarrassing? Madison, what's embarrassing is expecting someone to pay $125 for a salad after they've already spent $240 creating a memorable event for you. That's not just unfair, it's exploitative." She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but Chloe and Vanessa exchanged nervous glances. The tension was shifting. Other colleagues had started gathering nearby, sensing that the confrontation had escalated beyond the usual office gossip. "Look, Emma," Madison said finally, her voice quieter, we thought you'd understand the rules of our group. You've always been part of it." "And I replied evenly, "until I realized that part of being in the group meant being taken advantage of. I will not be your source of free money or unearned praise. I've found people who respect me, my boundaries, and my work. That's all I need." The silence that followed was heavy, but no longer threatening. A few colleagues whispered words of support. Marcus from aita, who had quietly observed, gave me a subtle thumbs up. Anna nodded, a small smile of solidarity. It was a validation I hadn't expected but needed. Madison's lips pressed into a thin line. Chloe looked uneasy, and Vanessa avoided my gaze completely. They had lost their grip, and even they knew it. That afternoon, the office felt different. The clique was still there, but their power had diminished. Invitations to after-work outings were no longer automatic. I chose where to go and with whom. People who had been silent before now sought my advice, acknowledging my skills and initiative. Even Madison approached me weeks later, a flicker of respect in her tone. "Emma, the company party was a huge success. You did amazing work." I smiled politely. "Thank you. I'm glad it went well. No additional explanation needed." I didn't need to justify my boundaries. My actions had already spoken for themselves. Over the next few months, my confidence grew, and so did my opportunities. I began freelancing, helping colleagues organize small corporate events. Each success reinforced the lesson I had learned. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no, it's about creating space for respect, growth, and genuine relationships. By the end of the year, the dynamics in the office had completely shifted. Madison, Chloe, and Vanessa were still there, but I no longer measured my worth by their approval. I had discovered a quiet power, one that wasn't dependent on their recognition, manipulation, or approval. I had reclaimed my life, my finances, and my dignity. And as I looked back on that chaotic night at Olive and Anchor, I realized it had been the turning point. One $3 sparkling water, one refusal to pay an unfair share, had sparked a transformation. It wasn't just about a restaurant. Billet was about valuing myself enough to demand fairness, respect, and integrity. Today, when I step into a room, I do so without fear. I know my worth, and I won't let anyone redefine it. The experience with Madison and her clique taught me that sometimes the people who try to diminish us end up being the catalyst for our greatest growth. And in that realization, I found freedom, confidence, and an unshakable sense of self.